Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. You know, there is a great fight on the undercard of Ward Kovalev. It's taking place at 140 pounds, Terence Crawford's division. And it's between Darleys Perez, who went the distance with Yorkis Gamboa, right, who got a draw the first fight with Anthony Crolla, right, and he's taking on an unbeaten fighter who's lesser known, Maurice Hooker. Now, to me, the fighter to watch in the fight is Maurice Hooker. It's rare when I see a guy who's this thin. Right? He is rail thin with this kind of punching power. Right? He reminds me of Alexis Arguello and Thomas Hearns. When you see him, it's a bit startling. Right? Especially when you see the power he has. Now, let me say this about Thomas Hearns. You know, Hearns was only tall and thin for a brief moment in his career. Right, early in his career. By the mid-'80s, you had Thomas Hearns challenging for the middleweight title. Right, not the welterweight, 147. You had Thomas Hearns up at 160. And by the end of the 80s, Thomas Hearns is fighting at light heavy. In other words, as he got older, his body filled out. Now, what concerns me with Maurice Hooker, who I'm picking to win this fight, is that he's 27 years old. But yet he's 5'11", 140 pounds. Right? He looks underfed. More troubling is the fact that he started his career at 140 pounds. And as you look at the fights he's had, you'll notice that the weights often are a little bit over 140. In other words, this isn't Manny Pacquiao, who, at welter, you'll notice at the weigh-in, Pacquiao is coming in at 144 or 145. Right? You're thinking to yourself, you know, Manny could have had an extra meal right before the weigh-in, and he would still have made weight. Now, this is a Danny Garcia type fighter, where the weight limit's 140, right? This guy is coming in at 141, 142 when the individual fight allows it. Now, why does it matter? It matters because when you keep yourself artificially light, after a while it starts to affect your stamina. In fact, I think it's more serious than that. At 27, you're bulletproof. But as you get older, if you keep yourself artificially drained, right, after a while, it does start to affect your overall health. Bernard Hopkins was 160 for a long time, and Bernard's taller than 6 feet, right? When Bernard gained weight to 175, right, he promised his mom he'd leave the sport. He decided he had one more fight that he had to have. So he takes on the champ at 175 pounds, Antonio Tarver. As he gains weight for the fight, Hopkins had a revelation. He hadn't felt that good in years. Right? His body was thanking him for the extra weight. In boxing, it's kind of odd. Guys just don't want to fight at their natural weight. Right? There's some mythology out there about being bigger than the other man in a sport with weight classes. Right? Everyone wants to be the big guy in the ring. Well, let me say this about Maurice Hooker. Really astonishing punching power. He has a decent jab. He has a great left hook. He has a great right cross. Right? Guys fall down in front of him. He hits that hard. As I said, think Alexis Arguello. But he doesn't move much. He has a puncher's mentality, right? You know the mindset. Do unto others, have them fall down, you win the fight. I look at his body and I wonder what happens if a guy can get inside and low on him. Right, again, he's 5'11". There's going to be a huge height gap in this fight. Right, 5'7" versus 5'11". Right? I believe a guy like a Ricky Hatton in his prime would beat Maurice Hooker by getting underneath him and by throwing hard punches to his body. I just don't feel at 33 years of age that Darleys Perez is that guy, right? Perez, let's just say, I know he went the distance with Gamboa, great fight, right? He is a seasoned vet, great survival skills. Unlike Hooker, he has a high guard, he's defensive, he waits to counter. But he fought Anthony Crawler twice. And I thought he looked like an old man. The second fight ends with him getting hit in his body. Dropped and stopped. Right? Crawler's not a big puncher. It seemed to me that Crawler was the more active fighter. Right? That Perez really, in a sport where Marvin Hagler walks away at 32. Perez, unlike some other guys, to me, is closer to the end than he is the beginning. Right? You can see these older guys pacing themselves. You could see these older guys being a bit risk averse. Right? Perez measured, wants a measured pace, isn't going to raise the temperature in the ring. I get the feeling he's not going to be able to match the punching power or the energy that Maurice Hooker at 27 years old is going to be able to bring in the ring. I'm expecting an action fight. I'm expecting a statement fight. I'm expecting Maurice Hooker to make this his showcase in a fight that, quite frankly, might actually rival the main event, Ward Kovalev, in terms of action, right? Perhaps not intrigue, because we know Ward and we know Kovalev, right? And we're going into the fight with our own preconceptions there. Here, I'm guessing if I stopped the guy at the mall and said, what do you think about boxing Maurice Hooker? He's going to look at me and say, get your hand off me, player, you know? I understand that. But you have a tall Alexis Arguello type puncher against a shorter guy who's savvy, who's held a belt in the past, right? Who's moving up in weight and who must be looking across the ring at his unbeaten opponent thinking, this guy's green, let me get inside, let me see if there's any muscle protecting that rib cage, right? I like Maurice Hooker to win the fight. I like the fight itself. I think this is going to be good, right? Maurice Hooker has a nickname. It's the kind of nickname you can only give to an explosive fighter. It's Mighty Mo. When you see highlights of the guy, and I've left his last fight in my favorites folder here online, you're going to think to yourself, mighty indeed. Right? The rumor is that he sparred with Terrence Crawford. I'd love to see those sparring films. Anyway, I like the young guy. I like the unbeaten guy in this fight, Maurice Hooker. Let me just say, when a guy relies on power like him, I wonder where he goes from here. Because I get the feeling if he gains the weight and loses that big man in the ring status, he's going to have a problem at 147. right? I think Keith Thurman, I think Danny Garcia, I think Sean Porter, I think Manny Pacquiao are going to look at this kid's body and just view it as an invitation to test it, right? Hooker doesn't have a lot of muscle tone on him. He really looks thin, right? If he stays at 140, I just wonder, how much longer will he be able to make weight in that division? Well, that's a long-term prognosis. Short-term, terrific puncher. I'm expecting him to show us some very good punching ability and an excellent right hand in this fight. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.